Tripping the Wire. Part 3, Chi-nets versus Chi-coms. After the failures of Christianity and Buddhist mind over matter as an effective cultural inoculant, Western republicanism was tried in China. The Kuomintang, KMT, the Chinese Nationalist Party, displaced the Qing Empire under President Sun Yat-sen in 1912. Soon, descending into warlord chaos, the Chinese Republic faltered on the brink of collapse for nearly 40 years. Chiang Kai-shek reformatted the KMT under principles similar to fascism and National Socialism in an attempt to strengthen it against the warlords, the Japanese, and the newly born Chinese Communist Party. Even Stalin supported Chiang's KMT over Mao's CCP from the mid-1920s through the end of World War II, because Stalin had determined that China was not yet ready for communism. It was Chiang's forces, which were China's main defenders against the Japanese aggression from 1931 through 1945. However, corruption and inefficiency plagued Chiang's KMT. Their triumph was in holding out against the Japanese, not in defeating them. When World War II ended, these vices would doom Chiang's Republic of China to communist takeover. While attempts to fuse the efforts of the KMT and CCP against the warlords were made, a bloodbath in 1927 Shanghai effectively ended such collaboration. Instead, Mao's CCP embarked upon a long march away from the coastal cities in order to escape destruction by the KMT. What arrived in the city of Yan'an, a town in the hinterland near enough to China's northern border to be succored by the Soviets, was akin to the Hebrews after their 40 years in the wilderness, or at least so the mythology of the CCP maintains. The Chinese Communist Party had been refined into a force purged of everything except for fanatical loyalty to Mao Tse-Tung. Even our military term gung-ho comes from an admiring American observing the People's Liberation Army's cohesion. The CCP's PLA had neither the corruption nor the inefficiency that plagued the KMT's army. As the Soviets entered the fight against Japan in the final weeks of World War II, Stalin finally had shifted his aid from the KMT to the CCP. Armed with Soviet Red Army weapons that had just defeated Nazi Germany, CCP forces soon began driving KMT forces out of northern China. By autumn 1949, Chiang was driven entirely from the mainland. He settled his surviving KMT forces on the former Japanese-held island of Taiwan. While Mao consolidated power on the mainland, Chiang reformed the Republic of China on his new island home. Chiang hoped to one day lead a new invasion of the rest of China. However, while the United States was willing to sponsor an independent KMT China on Taiwan, it was not willing to take part in a total war with the CCP. In fact, it was General Douglas MacArthur's attempt to bring Chiang into the Korean War on our side that provoked President Truman to fire him as Supreme Allied Commander there. Chiang's KMT proclaimed that Taiwan was the only true China. From 1949 through 1972, the non-communist world seemed to agree. However, as part of his opening to Red China, President Richard Nixon shifted U.S. and United Nations recognition from the Chinese nationalists of Taiwan to the Chinese communists. Since then, a policy of strategic ambiguity has been practiced by the United States. The CCP understands that while we recognize Peking as China's only capital, the U.S. will not permit the CCP to forcibly unify Taiwan with China. We maintain trade relations and second-class diplomatic ties with Taipei while providing its military with the basic necessities for the island's defense. After Chiang's death, Taiwan itself became transformed. Instead of a one-party KMT dictatorship, Taiwan developed into a thriving multi-party democracy. Its people maintain traditional pre-CCP language and naming conventions. Taiwanese have fused their intact Confucian traditions with Western democracy. One reason why the English translations of so many Chinese words and names in this podcast may seem unfamiliar is that I'm employing the traditional Wade-Giles system of translation used in the West before the 1980s and still in use in Taiwan. Today, more commonly, people employ the pinyin, a translation form promoted by Communist Peking. I elect not to employ what communists recommend in this or in anything else. Taiwan is the major producer of the world's silicon chips. It is astride key global sea and air trade routes. Its citizens enjoy a material prosperity akin to Japan and South Korea. Ironically, it is today's iteration of the KMT that inveigles for closer ties to Communist China. Despite this purposeful betrayal of the CCP's promises to preserve Macau and Hong Kong's liberties after their unification with Red China, today's KMT is the CCP's proxy in Taiwanese democracy. Now, it is Tsai Ing-wen's Democratic Progressive Party that champions a permanent separation between the Taiwanese nation and the People's Republic of China. Her courage and the courage of DPP voters is inspirational, to me anyway. Under the direst of threats, she and her voters are charting a course away from totalitarianism and towards a future of freedom and human rights for Taiwan. Their reward is PLA warships and warplanes increasingly violating Taiwanese airspace. China bullies anyone that they can on the world stage to join them in classifying Taiwan as being merely a rebellious Chinese province. Taiwanese athletes and businesses operate internationally, but under a cloud of opprobrium from Peking. The CCP has publicly announced that by reason or force, they will soon reunify Taiwan with their homeland. Taiwan's very existence as a free nation is threatened daily by the CCP. The CCP, like Hitler's NSDAP before it, claims ownership of all descendants whose ancestors once emigrated from their homeland. The Chinese diaspora, consisting of communities throughout Eurasia and the Americas, suffers from the ambitions of the CCP to demand their primary loyalty. This is why Chinatowns around the world have been infiltrated by the CCP's secret police. Chinese Americans, sometimes even 6 generations from their family's immigration, have been harassed within the United States for expressing anti-CCP ideas by Chinese government officials. The CCP's thirst for total control over everything they descry respects no boundaries and abides by no law.